Meanwhile, on the comic box.
Bow 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 down bow 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 to beep down don't ba da bop do ba da bop do wow.
Comics.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting closer. We're getting closer. I almost wanted to start out with like a bum bum bum. Bum bum boo to boo to boo doo doom doom doom. But that's not on key, so at the beginning of Hurt. Hey everyone, welcome to the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I am Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek. I am joined once again by lovable Liam O'Rourke. Hi, Liam.
Hi, Rob.
And this week is all about Logan and X-23. The new trailer came out last week, and we were so stoked on it that I decided we were going to hold off for a whole week to talk about it so that we could all together read X-23 Innocence Lost, which tells the origin story of Laura Kinney, a.k.a. X-23, a.k.a. now Wolverine, which I suppose we'll get into briefly. But first, Weekly Geekery. How was your week, Liam?
I had a pretty good week. How about yourself, Rob?
Not bad. What were you up to?
Not a lot. The usual work. Playing video games, doing a little bit of pop hunting, but nothing too outrageous.
Okay. Was there any game in particular you were sticking to this week?
Not a lot. I played a little bit of Far Cry and some of the Beyond Earth, which is another of the Sid Meier's games.
Okay, so the guy that does Civilization.
Yes.
Okay. See, I've never been able to get into those, but maybe I just don't have the patience for them.
It's true. It's kind of nice because that sort of game, you can kind of put a movie on or a TV show or something on and watch that while you're playing the game because the game doesn't require your 100%, apt focus the whole time.
I can get that. I feel that way about MMOs sometimes as well, where it's just I almost need another thing going on. Otherwise, it's not enough to garner my attention.
Yeah.
I have been playing just a little bit. I played a couple very brief games, but I got back into Overwatch, which I bought back like around Christmas and then sort of let sit. I played it a couple times, but I finally got back into it. I played a couple times. I actually got to play one game with Beej this morning, Professor Beej from the Geek to Geek podcast. I found him online as I was updating the game for whatever the latest release thing is. I believe it's Chinese New Year or something.
Okay.
So they have a whole theme going on and a capture the flag game you can play and yada, yada, yada. But I played that. I enjoyed that. I am still about halfway through Voltron Season 2. So I'm slowly making progress on that. And then I read, outside of our assigned reading this week, the X-23 Innocence Lost, I read the first 2.5 volumes of Invincible. I don't remember where. I want to say I was like midway through the first volume last week. But I finished that. And then I read the second volume, and I'm partway through the third volume. And they're already dropping some plot bombs, which I love about indie comics. And Robert Kirkman in general, he does not mind killing off. Like, you assume Rick Grimes is going to stick around kind of thing, his main character in Walking Dead, but everybody else is on the chopping block. And it's the same as Game of Thrones. And I like that. You need to be able to be unpredictable. So for an unpredictable superhero story, I am really enjoying it. And then I got the 2 Moon Knight trades that I ordered in the mail today. I think I might have talked about that last week when I ordered them.
You did?
Yeah. So I got those in the mail today. So hooray, 2 more trades for the shelf.
All right.
And that's it for me for Weekly Geekery. I don't think there's really anything else. Did you ever get to the Telltale Batman? I really wanted to, and I think I downloaded it, but I never played it.
Yeah, I didn't have time this week.
Okay.
It is something I listened to our episode last week, including the interview you did with Void, and it definitely got my interest in the game, though. I just haven't had much time this week to do it.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be on my list for next week for sure. And
Yeah.
then I also noticed when I went on there, and this is why I'm not as big a fan of buying. I mean, it's so easy to buy games digitally, but in general, I like owning physical copies. And part of it is so I know it's there and I'm not just spending money on something I ignore. I went on Steam to play I honestly don't remember what I went on Steam to... Oh, no, I think I went on Steam to download the Telltale Batman. And when I did, I realized that I bought, on the last winter Steam sale, I bought Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight.
Okay.
Both of which I have not played. Or I take that back. I played a little bit of Arkham Knight at a friend of mine's, but I haven't, beaten the game. I haven't sat and played through the game myself. So apparently I have those downloaded. I have just not played them yet. I've heard Origins isn't as good. And Knight seemed too shiny, I guess, if that's the way of putting it, where everything's wet so they can show off their graphics. And I feel like that was a detriment to the look of the game. But that's just from what I can remember.
Yeah.
And that is it. That's it for my weekly geekery. Boy, that didn't really take long.
No.
We're not going to do news this week because we just want to focus on Logan and X-23. There is a piece of Logan news, but first, should we just dive straight into a topic of the week intro and start talking about these trailers?
That sounds good to me.
All right, take us in, Liam. Topic of the week?
You're not going to contribute.
Oh, I'm
some
sorry.
scat
You were
vocals?
waiting for me to do it. Please, go again.
Bow, 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 bow. All right. Yeah, I think that worked. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But remember, we always have to say then, it'd have to be like, topic of the week. That's how you finish it out. So if you want to finish it out, you got to make sure you say topic of the week. Otherwise, I guess I'll have to call it kinks to be worked out. The important thing is we're both here and we're both really excited about this movie, which is a little scary because anytime you get excited about a superhero movie, you have to kind of check yourself.
Yeah, I did allow myself to get excited for Days of Future Past. And while I still haven't seen Apocalypse, I wasn't disappointed by Days of Future Past. So,
it was good, but I didn't like Apocalypse as much as I liked Days of Future Past, but I did have issues with it, and mostly it was just as a comic geek. I had issues with the fact that, of course, it was Wolverine they sent back, whereas in the comic book, it's in the future, and it's an adult Kitty Pryde who gets sent back into her younger body. And, but it's Wolverine. He's became the center point. He wasn't really, like, Rogue was kind of the center character of the first one, but then...
Oh, yeah.
And I almost like that. It's like Captain Jack Sparrow. I don't want a movie that's just about Captain Jack. I want a movie that, it was about, Legolas at sea and Keira Knightley. And Captain Jack was a side character. He's the Jay and Silent Bob. He's the character you love from the movie, but he's not the movie. He's the supporting character because those are always your most interesting characters because you need to leave your main character a little less developed so if they're supposed to be relatable for the audience. You never get to learn a ton about that character because you're supposed to put yourself in the main character's shoes. Otherwise, if it's a thing like, I don't know, Sherlock or something, where Sherlock Holmes is the main character, and then the side character is the one that's less developed and has to ask all of the questions, because then you put yourself in Watson's shoes. He's the audience surrogate, is the phrase they use. I'm getting away from myself. The point is, I didn't think Wolverine now having 3 of his own movies, I don't know that he needed to also be the central figure of that film, but it was good. But Logan trailer, where do you want to start? Should we just start with the teaser? Can you remember them enough to split them up?
Yeah, I can.
So in the teaser trailer, we had that amazing song, first of all, which was perfect.
It really was.
Perfect. The Johnny Cash cover of Hurt. And it starts out, we see his bloody shaking hands, but the blood is specifically on his knuckles, which is either he was punching somebody really hard or he had popped his claws and he's not healing right. We see he's all scarred up. He says that all of the mutants are gone. We know that Professor X is still around, but he seems not exactly comatose, but it just shows him like staring up in this bed that's in the middle of this side-turned water tower, which I took for maybe some type of Cerebro situation, but I don't know.
I was going to say that. I was wondering if that was meant to be like the ruins of Cerebro.
I don't think so. It looked very much like it was an overturned water tower when they show the exterior shot of Logan walking in.
Yeah.
And then you have the He's got like some plants that he's growing on a thing. I assume he's like starting to grow vegetables to plant. Like he's in a deserty area.
Yeah.
And then we get the basis of what we think the plot is. There's a girl, there's a man who shows up. Those of us who are comic geeks know him as Donald Pierce from the Metal Arm. He was a member of the Hellfire Club, I believe.
I believe you're right.
And I don't know if he ever had like a villain name. His army of cyborg soldiers is known as the Reavers, but I don't know if he himself ever had like a supervillain
Notable
name.
aliases are White Bishop, White King, and Cyclops for some reason.
Maybe there was something where he disguised himself as Cyclops would be my thought. But White Bishop and White King are positions within the Hellfire Club.
Yeah.
So he seems to be our bad guy, and he's there to collect the girl. And then we get a glimpse that this girl might be more than she seems, just a girl. And you hear Professor X saying she's very much like you. And we get that, idea that, oh, this might be X-23. Seems obvious to those of us who know the character. And then, I don't know, is there anything else I'm really missing from there's that last shot, and I have a theory about that, but I don't know if I want to get into that now, that last shot where she holds his hand and he's standing there and they're covered in blood and he looks down at her.
Oh, that scene devastates me. It just wrecks me every time I see it.
See, for me, it was the look that Professor X gives while they're sitting at the table. Because it's this like smiling grandfather look, like, what a nice little moment we're having here sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it is the voiceover narration that you're getting at that part of the trailer. And I think part of it is, the visuals of it. Like clearly he's just been through a battle, he's feeling some remorse, some regret, and then all of a sudden she comes up and just slides her little hand in his. And I mean, it just devastates me. It's so well done.
Oh, especially as a father of the, how's your kid now? 5, 6?
He is 6 years old.
6, yeah. So I get that. Though it seems like in this, if we talk about the second trailer, Professor X, in the Red Band version where he swears, mentions her age as being 11, I think.
Yeah.
But to go back to that last shot, and this is, I'm not going to say spoilers because we don't know. We are going to be talking about X-23 in the comic books and things that have happened in the comics, but we can't speak to what the movie is going to do. So if you don't want to know anything, I guess you're listening to the wrong podcast. Come back next week. I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, go back and listen to an old episode. There's plenty of them.
There are. This is episode 30. I'm going to get this wrong off the top of my head. I believe this is episode 33.
I think you're right.
Yeah, which I don't say in the episode. I should start doing that. Just announce. Originally, like way back when, I think I had mentioned that, or kicked the idea around of calling it an issue. Like issue 33 of the comic box. And I got some good response on that. I just kept forgetting to do that. Anyway, so that last shot, I want to throw out a theory at you. We see Wolverine covered in blood. He's clearly been through the fight. I'm guessing it might be that fight where we see him running through the woods, in his wife beater sort of thing. Walking stick to me either. I think it's a shovel. And I think when he's standing there and she comes up and holds his hand, I think it's because they just buried Professor X.
Ooh. I could see that as being a real possibility. I didn't even think about that. It would fit because he had that very reflective look on his face at the end, and for her to just kind of come up and slide her hand into his and kind of like snap his attention back into the present. That seems like it would fit to me. Yeah,
and that brings my biggest question of the second trailer, which is also partly in the first, but we get a little more of it in the second. And that's the scene where everything is sort of vibrating and there's bright lights and you see Professor X sitting in a chair with what looks like, a gun, not to his head, but being held by someone standing right behind him as a bright light fills the window.
Yeah.
And my thought was that would have been a prequel scene that would be analogous to maybe something in Old Man Logan, where, spoilers for the Old Man Logan book, Wolverine accidentally, I guess, kills everybody.
Yeah. Mysterio is supposedly tricks him into thinking that they're all the bad guys, and he decimates them.
Right, and we might read Old Man Logan at some point. I thought about doing it for this one because the first thing we said is, oh man, are they doing Old Man Logan? But they really can't. Because while Old Man Logan was a road trip book where he travels from the West Coast to the East Coast with Hawkeye, in order to be sort of his bodyguard for the trip, or his navigator, as Hawkeye says, for the trip, in order to get money to help pay off I'm not going to spoil things, so we'll just say the crime lords, if you will, that own the part of land that he is in. This movie does not seem to reference him having a family. It doesn't seem to reference any other sort of villains or anything out there. And Old Man Logan was all about the Marvel Universe and all the supervillains that are everywhere now, having taken over the country.
Yeah. My other thought, and I have no reason to believe this is true or not other than just a hunch, in that scene where it shows like the camera shaking a lot, it also shows like Laura, the little girl, crawling on the floor, and it also shows a scene where Wolverine like pops his claws, and they use that camera shaking a few times. And I've wondered this since the first time I watched it. Is that maybe Magneto that we see from behind rather than Patrick Stewart as Professor X?
That is a really interesting idea. I would love to see Ian McKellen pop up in this movie, and I think he'd do it if it was right.
Yeah. Or Michael Fassbender dressed up, either way. Like, I mean, it just makes me wonder, because like the camera shaking, is that just a visual effect done by the filmmaker, or is that something going on within, the film that is affecting the characters?
Right.
Because with the little girl crawling on the floor like she is, it made me feel like maybe, he's using his magnetism power and she can't walk properly or something.
Right, like clearly she has to be injured or something. My thought was it was either like a bomb going off from the first trailer where we just see everything vibrating in the lights and Logan running down the hall or walking down the hall and having his claws out. But yeah, it would have to be some sort of force. I always assumed it was like a jet landing, something that would cause that much shaking. But I suppose it could be another mutant. I mean, it could also be some new person with the Phoenix Force if we want to get crazy with it. I don't expect that at all.
No.
And it's important to note, the one piece of news I guess we can share is it was recently revealed that this movie doesn't really take place within established X-Men continuity. It's sort of its own side Wolverine story, which I love. More of that, please.
Yeah, it's meant to be post X-Men Apocalypse, but it doesn't necessarily maintain the same timeline as X-23 and the standalone Logan movies in the past.
Right. Well, the timeline all got changed after Days of Future Past anyway, I guess, right?
That's true.
Yeah. Clearly, we're going to get some really good X-23 action, and it's clearly Donald Pierce, and it's clearly the Reavers. The rest of it is sort of up in the air. It appears that X-23 seeks them out, because when they show up and Logan is like, what girl? At first you're thinking maybe X-23 had snuck in at that point and he didn't know about it, or he did know and just, was saying what girl and lying, and then he gets beat up. Now, I don't know if that means he's going to be a pacifist in this one like he was in Old Man Logan. He had decided after he had committed such awful crimes that he would never pop his claws again. And spoilers, he does, obviously. But that's sort of the whole point of that entire story arc, is this pacifist Logan who keeps getting beat up and beat up and beat up and finding where that point is that he comes back to be Wolverine again. But I don't know. Well, I suppose let's do this. You said you found a synopsis, like a proper written synopsis of the film?
Yeah, they're kind of short, but yeah, I found them.
Okay, go ahead and read one of those, and then from that we can start doing the rest of what we think, and then we can dig into who exactly X-23 is.
Okay. It was both on Wikipedia and on Google.
Okay.
So it says, premise. A weary Logan cares for an ailing Professor X in a hideout on the Mexican border. His attempts to hide from the world and his legacy, however, are upended when a young mutant arrives being pursued by dark forces.
Oh. Well, that doesn't say much at all. Okay.
No.
I was hoping it would at least give some sort of idea as to what killed mutants, or because it seemed like maybe it's, the legacy virus, not to tie it into the legacy TV show, or, if it was some sort of cancer, because clearly if Wolverine's having trouble healing, it was something that affected mutant powers, which could then suggest that maybe Professor X has no abilities anymore.
Yeah. The IMDb does not have any further synopsis to it, so I think they're maybe keeping it a little close to the chest on this one.
You know what? Good.
Yeah, I don't need a million details before the movie comes out.
Yeah, let us wonder. Let us play that game.
Yeah, give us a little bait, get us interested, and then you got me.
Right, exactly. Like, I wonder who the other person having dinner with Logan, Professor X, and X-23 is. We get a wider shot of that scene now, and there's another person sitting at that table. So there's clearly at least one other person in that area.
Yes.
And
it does have a few characters listed on Wikipedia that I don't see in the trailer. Mainly Richard E. Grant as Xander Rice, who we know from the X-23 trade that we just all read.
Yes, we do.
And Stephen Merchant as a character named Caliban, who is a mutant who can sense and track other mutants, who is helping Logan take care of Xavier.
That's really interesting. Maybe that's that other person sitting there, which is different. I'm trying to remember, because we met Caliban in Age of Apocalypse, but clearly this is a different type of...
Yes, this is a different actor playing him. Stephen Merchant is a British comedian.
Right.
Yeah, so like from An Idiot Abroad, and he was in that wonderful movie 23 or whatever with Halle Berry.
Okay. I don't, that doesn't ring any bells. I thought the movie 23, wasn't that the Jim Carrey thriller?
No, I'm thinking of the wrong thing.
It doesn't
movie
matter.
something or other. Yeah.
That's, whatever. Okay. Well, that does not fill in nearly as many gaps, but that's interesting that we're going to get Xander Rice. I wonder, should we just naturally let that pull us into our discussion of X-23 Innocence Lost?
Might as well.
All right, you want to take us in?
Sure.
Topic of the week, part 2?
Part trois?
Part 2. Like Hot Shots.
Yeah, Hot Shots.
Part 2. So our reading homework for this week was X-23 Innocence Lost. And I didn't bother pulling up the writer and artist. I wish I had. If you got a keyboard, you go ahead and do that, Liam. I want to say it was...
I'm holding it in front of me.
Okay.
It is story by Craig Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
And pencils by Billy Tan. Inks by John Sabal. And colors by Brian Haberlin.
And I like that you read all of them because they all contributed.
Hey, they did. They wouldn't have a credit if they didn't do part of the work.
There you go. I can tell you the character of X-23, it has the same sort of origin story as our very own Harley Quinn. I don't know why our very own, but as Harley Quinn, in that she was originally created for a television show, particularly X-Men Evolution, which was a cartoon that was on years ago that was about a teenaged team of X-Men. And then they just took characters like Beast, Storm, and Wolverine and made them adults, while Cyclops, Jean Grey, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and we'll just say and others were high school students. So it was a kind of an interesting twist. I hated the idea at first because it was this, why does everybody always need to be teenagers? Like, It's okay to give us adult X-Men stories. We loved the 90s X-Men. I guess maybe that's why they included Jubilee on the team. Or in the original pilot for the X-Men show that didn't happen, Pride of the X-Men or whatever, it was Kitty Pryde. But in any case, it was an episode of this show, and I know the two writers were Craig Kyle and Chris Yost, both who went on to work on the character once she transitioned to comics. In the show, to the best of my knowledge, I didn't watch the full episode. I found it on YouTube and clicked through it. So you can find it on YouTube if you look for it. Is that it might be S.H.I.E.L.D. that did it, because Nick Fury factors in, where they decided that, Wolverine was too important, and so they stole some of his DNA and cloned him. It was a female clone with two adamantium claws coming out of each hand and one out of each foot, and she is sort of this special agent. They don't call her an assassin in the show, obviously. And she escapes and gets out, and if I remember correctly, by the end of the episode, she comes and fights Wolverine, and they talk and they cry and they hug, and then I think she disappears once the S.H.I.E.L.D. or the government or whomever Weapon X comes looking for her again. And so she doesn't actually join the team in the cartoon. It was just sort of this interesting little episode about a female Wolverine clone. And the character was so popular, they brought her over into the comics. They made some changes. In the comics, obviously, her origins are slightly different. And instead of having a darker skin tone and brown hair, in the comic book, she has pale white skin and black hair in order to sort of make her closer to Wolverine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to sort of throw out a brief synopsis of the comic, and then we'll dig into the origins of X-23?
Sure. Innocence Lost, it sort of focuses around the team of scientists who are working to create a weaponized version of Wolverine that they can control. And they do so by taking some of his DNA from the original weapons program and are able to, over a course of quite a lot of time and effort, create a embryo that is a double X genome, so not a male but a female, due to some Y chromosome damage or something like that. So they are able to create a female embryo that is X factor positive, and they are hoping to turn that embryo into a weapon they can control and use as an assassin. They are eventually able to successfully age her to the point where she has her X factor kick in. They coat her, certainly her claws. I'm not sure if they did her whole body. They didn't show it within the actual graphic novel, but they talked about the fact that they would do it, where they would lace the rest of her skeleton with the adamantium, just like Wolverine had. And it's got a bit of a personal touch to it, because the doctor who is brought in to help them get the chromosome sequence worked out is eventually brought in to also be a sort of surrogate mother for X-23. So she gets emotionally involved, and it's the story over years taking place of X-23 growing to young teenagehood. And, well, if you've read it, you don't need to have the ending saved for you. But yeah, everybody dies except for X-23. Mm-hmm. And I think it was very well done. I liked reading it quite a bit. It made me very interested in the character. Yeah, they did a very good job of making her a very tragic character, like Wolverine had been, which is always one of the things that drew me to his character.
Yeah, and now the comic mostly has sort of that omniscient narrator point of view. However, it does spend a great deal of time on the doctor, Sarah Kinney, who is the one who decides to sort of go rogue. She is brought in to do the impossible and clone Wolverine, even though they have that imperfect sample. And so behind the backs of the person she is working with, who is Xander Rice, and the boss, the head of the program, she decides to just duplicate the X chromosome and create a female, and then said, hey, I got this thing. And it was the 23rd trial was the one where she did the double X, I believe. You read it after I read it, and then I loaned it to you, so you might know that one better than me. But that's why her code name is X-23, whereas Wolverine is Weapon X, and they retcon that eventually to say it was Weapon 10. That's why it's X, which, whatever.
Yeah.
So X-23 is just the 23rd clone and the first one that was viable. And then, when they found out she had gone rogue, they punished her by making her carry the baby to term. And I think if we have Xander Rice in the movie, we can briefly touch on his story. The idea is that his father worked on the original Weapon X program and was murdered when Wolverine got out and escaped. The scene that we saw in, I think, Age of Apocalypse, I believe, is the one where there's the brief scene of Wolverine escaping. Yeah. So there's a brief scene in X-Men Apocalypse where you see Wolverine escaping. The idea being when that happens and he finally gets out and runs away, in the process, in his berserker rage, he kills Xander's father, and then Xander then continues to wear his dog tags around his neck with the Wolverine claw slice, whatever, through the dog tags.
Yeah.
So he holds this huge grudge. So he is the main antagonist of X-23 growing up, where when she's 8 years old, because they don't advance her aging. They don't use like anything special to age her rapidly.
No.
Once she gets to 8 years old, they decide they're done waiting. She's been trained in combat and that sort of thing up to this point, but they decided that they're done waiting, and so they subject her to radiation poisoning in order to activate her X gene. And once that happens and they find out she has claws, he decides he's going to go in and take out the claws and coat them. He doesn't care that they would get as big as Wolverine's in time. He doesn't go in to coat her entire skeleton. It is just the claws, but the whole thing is he pulls them out, coats them in adamantium, and puts them back in, and he does it all without anesthetic. And, you know, he whispers, "This is for my father," or whatever, because to him, she is basically Wolverine. You know, He is this representation of the thing that killed his father. So I believe, if I remember the hallmarks correctly, it was age 8, they do that. I believe age 12 is when they send her out, or maybe it is 11, when they start sending her out on missions, and then she's an assassin for hire for like 3 years or 4 years before the end of the book.
It was when she was 11. She was sent out to kill a presidential nominee.
That's right.
To make it obvious that, you know, she could get to anyone at any time. And it's a big bloodbath because she kills not only him, but his entire security detail, all his like cabinet members, his family, his wife and children were there. I mean, she just slaughters all of them and then escapes.
Right.
And then she gets a lot more work.
Yeah, it's just sort of this montage kind of thing, saying that she's been doing it for a lot. They do explore that in her own series later on, where they talk a little bit about what she was doing during those years that she was being hired out. Like in one situation, she pretended to be the Kingpin's daughter, knowing that she would get abducted, and in order to murder and or bring in the abductors that were threatening Wilson Fisk or something along those lines.
Yeah, because they do name drop Fisk a few times within the graphic novel here. So
right. And it's important to point out that in this graphic novel, though, she is 11 when she starts working, but by the end, when it shows her showing up in New York City, which is where her official first comic book appearance took place, was in a comic book called NYX about homeless mutants in New York City. She's 15 years old. So by this point in the comics, I believe she's closer to, 17, 18 or so. But at the point she's going to appear in the movie, she's 11. So we would assume that at the point in the film, it's very much like maybe she's just escaped, but clearly she's been trained.
Yeah.
And because there's the scene in the second trailer, the very beginning of the second trailer, where she's in the convenience store, and as soon as the clerk lays his hands on her to tell her, hey, you have to pay for those snacks, she flips him over and gets ready to pop claws.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they're going to do the scent trigger in the movie like they did in the graphic novel.
So the other big key of that graphic novel is introducing the idea of a trigger scent, which is used to drive X-23 into a berserker rage, and then she literally just murders everything in her way. Anything around her, she just goes nuts and kills.
Yep. Her sensei, who trained her in fighting and was one of the only 2 people who treated her like a human being. Rice goes in and puts a couple drops of the scent on his sword handle. So the next day when they are doing their sparring session, she just slaughters him. And
right.
It's like Wolverine in his berserker rage, where it's not even a conscious thing. It's just totally primal.
Which, again, is just all attempts by Xander to dehumanize her. He doesn't care about the person. He hates the thought of Wolverine. He just wants a weapon that will make him money. So any attempt he can have, or anything he can do to dehumanize her, he's going to try and do, including killing the only people that were ever nice to her, the sensei, and then at the end of the story, her mother, Sarah, who at the very, very end of the trade names her and tells her her name is Laura.
Yeah.
So hence Laura Kinney. Laura, being named after the scientist who cloned her.
And like father, like son, Xander is shown as having escaped the facility with his dying moments with an important piece of scientific breakthrough in his hand. His father had the original blood sample of Wolverine in his hand that was recovered from him, and now Xander dies with the scent trigger in his hand. So we don't see who comes in and collects it at the end.
And I can tell you, it does show up in her story later on.
Yeah.
The notable one that I have read is Avengers Arena, where Arcade, arguably one of the silliest X-Men villains of all time, but still a very fun one. When it comes to comic books, though, I do think Arcade's a fun character.
It's true. And the cartoon show. He was great in the cartoon show.
Right. So he collects all of the sort of young Avengers Academy characters, which at this point in her history included X-23, when she was a member of Avengers Academy, and some of the Runaways, and Darkhawk for whatever reason, and basically goes Hunger Games with them. Says, you're all stuck in this place, only one of you gets to get out alive. And then the whole thing is he's live streaming the whole thing. So as these kids have to deal with whether or not to murder one another, to sacrifice themselves for their friends, everybody is seeing it. And one of the things that happens is somebody steps on a trap that releases the trigger scent, and X-23 goes after everybody. Some other things to know about the character is that she only has adamantium claws. The rest of her body is normal, which it might be the reason, is arguably the reason, her healing factor is sometimes shown as actually being better than Wolverine's.
Yeah, that's what they were saying in the trade, that when they did the claws initially, they found that her healing factor was actually better than Wolverine's, and they theorized that it was the adamantium that was actually causing a little bit of a retardation of his healing factor.
Right. That the fact that his body is always handling this, metal around his bones is the reason, that he doesn't heal quite as fast as she does. Because it's literally been, she's had an arm cut off and regrew the arm, and then she had them take the cut off arm and take the adamantium claws out of it and pull out her bone claws and replace them. She's been shot in the head and recovered. She's a very interesting character in that she, I think by this point, has sort of come past the I'm trying to understand what it is to be human. There was a lot of that, especially once she was brought into the X-Force book, where Cyclops ordered Wolverine to basically create a hit squad to go out and proactively take out threats to mutant kind. This was after the No More Mutants thing, where most of the mutant population lost their powers. So there was only a small number of mutants left, and there were sort of religious groups called the Purifiers who were on a quest to completely eradicate mutants from the earth. And so Cyclops had Wolverine assemble this team, and one of the people he had on there was X-23. And so there was this great storyline of is this really Wolverine trying to look after her and keep her close, or is he just one other person using her as a weapon? I really enjoyed that book. I mean, it's bloody, bloody fun. Like, it's a super violent book, and it has that look of like a computer-generated art almost style. So it's a very slick-looking book. But that was sort of one of my main introductions to X-23, and then I went back and started reading earlier stuff, including this book. Is there anything else that we are missing that's really, I think, important? I suppose it's the fact that she doesn't talk much.
Yeah, she's very quiet.
When she's in character, like when she's trying to infiltrate, when she went in to kill the presidential candidate, she played a handicapped girl who needed crutches to get around and had braces on her legs. And she was able to play that character flawlessly, but you never really see her talk except for maybe one or two words when she's back at what they call the facility.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we don't see her say a single word in the movie. Or in the trailers, I mean, so far.
Yeah, it's just like feral, but yeah, I don't see any actual dialogue of hers yet.
So it might be a silent role.
Could be.
Or maybe she'll finally say something towards the end, is kind of my thought.
Yeah.
I wonder if Professor X has his powers, whether or not he'll sort of kind of know what she's thinking. Maybe it's not coherent or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to say about the trailer that I'm thinking of. In the second trailer, the extended Red Band one is the one that I just watched before we started recording here. you have different lengths of beard on Logan as well, telling
Yeah.
you that some of those things might be happening later where he's like, I'm not what you think I am or whatever. He's almost clean shaven there. He just has like the mutton chops. So I
Yeah.
don't know if maybe that's a flashback or if that's later in the movie where he finally like cleans up, because for most of it he's got the beard of varying lengths. You know, sometimes it's pretty bushy, sometimes it's a little more clean cut. So I think we're going to get at least a bit of a timeline here. It's not all going to be just here's a thing that happened over a weekend, like say Thor.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to get some flashbacks or flash forwards or a story that takes place over a long period of time.
Yeah. If nothing else, the scene where he's talking about like all the mutants are gone,
Yeah.
it's like he's clearly at a funeral in the distance, like up against a tree. So that's probably, a flashback scene, if nothing else.
Very true. And I think that's also telling of how this is very much a departure from Old Man Logan, in that, Old Man Logan was post-apocalyptic. And
Yeah.
this clearly, we have convenience stores, we have people driving around, and I don't know, they're driving a limo for some reason, but that, there is the funeral whenever that might take place. It couldn't have been that long ago. So I don't think it's necessarily an evil government, whatever. It seems more like it would have been some sort of natural or viral thing. It could have been the government that did it, but I don't think it's like Magneto rules America now. Like, I don't think we're going to see that.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I think that's too much plot.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's fine with me if, the mutants are few and far between now. So, yeah. I think that makes for a more interesting story.
Exactly. Now, is there anything else that you think we should mention that was from the graphic novel?
The only other thing that I wanted to make mention of is for all their intensive training and for all the ways that they tried to mentally manipulate her into not being a human, she does still have an inner humanity. When she's sent to kill the guy who is the head of the program, when Xander wants to, take charge of the whole thing himself, she's sent to kill the man, his wife, who is apparently also Xander's lover, and the love child of Xander and this woman, and she refuses to kill the child. So, you think in the moment when you're reading it that she does, because of the way that they draw it and they write it, they make it seem that way, but it is later revealed that they find the child outside behind the house, traumatized, and the house is on fire. So they, the official story is that the two parents died in a fire and the son was somehow able to escape. But as we, of course, know, it was X-23 who killed them and burnt the house down, but spared the child.
Yeah. And I suppose there's also the self-harm thing, but I don't expect to see any of that in Logan.
No.
She also sort of punishes herself when she knows she's doing something she shouldn't, and that's by cutting on herself with her claw. So I guess the final question then is, what is it you are hoping to see most out of this Logan movie? And I'm sure we'll revisit it when we get close to the movie coming out. But at this point, after reading the X-23 trade, what are you most hoping to see in Logan?
I guess sort of what I wanted to see the most is something that's already been achieved just by the trailer. And that is like having a real story with real emotions told in a world that uses, mutants and characters like that in a fantastic world, but to make it feel like a real personal story, I've always really liked Wolverine as a character, and I was saddened by the fact that his two standalone movies are both lackluster at best. I think that he, as a character, was handled well within the first two X-Men movies, certainly. The third one is a trash. So just to be able to see like a real quality story done with Logan, and to really treat the character with the gravitas that he carries, and not to just make him a joke or just like, let's just see him kill a bunch of things. Yeah, the Wolverine Origins movie that they did with Ryan Reynolds as the Deadpool character. Part of that movie I liked quite a bit. Like the opening sequence, that was pretty much taken straight from the comic. But after that, it just dissolved into this mess of a movie. So the thing I really want to see is just one whole standalone Wolverine movie that is good. And
Yeah.
it seems so far that, from the trailer anyway, that they've achieved that and are treating it with, a real movie kind of treatment as opposed to let's just make another comic book movie.
Right. I agree completely. What is our release date for Logan?
March 3rd.
So we are definitely going to come back to this before it comes out. At least we're going to mention it, and then I'm sure we're going to see this opening weekend and have a review for you guys. We will do what I've done before, though. I wait a week before I put out a review because I don't want to do spoilers. I know people could just wait before they listen to the podcast, but I always feel, maybe it's just me, but I always feel a little bit of that, oh, shoot, I got to go do this thing because now I have a podcast sitting on my phone taking up space and I can't listen to it until I read this thing or watch this thing. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah. Oh, no, I still have not seen the Batman versus Superman movie, and the podcast that I like did an episode on it, which I still have not listened to, even though I've listened to like all 300 other of their episodes. So, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Well, I have one other thing. My phone just buzzed at me, and it is a tweet from Void, so you know exactly when we're recording this, saying that you can get the entirety of the Batman Telltale game for just $16.
There you go.
Yeah, that does not seem bad. It was $25 when we were talking about it last week. It is now $16, so might jump on that. I don't know. What do you say? Let's make that next week. Let's go and we'll play this and we'll come back and we'll do Weekly Geekery. There was a bit of other Marvel movie news that we didn't cover this week. We can go over new stuff and then maybe we'll try our hand at a little Batman Telltale and we'll come back next week. Any other final thoughts on Logan or X-23 Innocence Lost?
Not specifically. Just really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's head into the end of the show then with a shout out appadoo bountin' fway.
Wow.
And with that, we will close the comic box for this week. Liam, thanks again so much for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it seems like we're going to try and make this a regular thing, and that is lovely because it's so much nicer than talking to myself.
Yeah.
This is part of the Geek to Geek Podcast Network. If you would like info on any of our other Geek to Geek podcast shows, head over to geektogeekcast.net, and you can sign up for updates on any of our shows. You can find me on Twitter at Rob's Comic Box, which, boy, I guess, am I going to have to change that now? If we turn it to it's not really my comic box anymore if you're here with me every week.
Ooh.
Oh, no, I might have to look at that. I have like 30 followers on Twitter on that account. But if they're there, it means they know about this podcast. So I don't want to, have to force those people to do it. Well, hit me up on there. Let me know. Let me know if you think I need to swap over and create another new and get rid of Rob's Comic Box and make it, the Comic Box Cast or something. I tried a couple different options and most were taken. But, we can work that out. You can also follow me personally on Twitter at Noby. That's at KNOWBY, if you're interested in things that I do or say that are not comic book related. Most importantly, you can come find us on Reddit. We have a subreddit for the podcast network that is reddit.com/r/geektogeekcast, where you will find all sorts of cool stuff, including a chance to share what you've been up to this week, your very own weekly geekery. Liam, as always, I believe we can find you on Facebook.
You can.
At Liam O'Rourke. I will include a link in the show notes because I got a link to your specific profile. So if you want to know the right Liam, head down to the show notes and check that out. And I think that's it. Star ratings and reviews are always amazing. I do my best to read all of them, and they really do help. So if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a star rating or a review.
Yeah. Do all of that.
Do all of those things. Literally all of them. So until next week, I am Rob.
And I am Liam.
And go play Batman the Telltale series. Woo!
Woohoo!
Map, dan, map, wow, with a comic box. Got a little review with some X-23. Talking about Logan trailer. So exciting.
Well, I can't top that.
All right, then. See you next week.